Oh yeah, absolutely, and that brings up a whole bunch of other questions. Like, if they alter the neutral space so that their fighting style is viable, how does that affect the other character? You could argue that they only alter reality for themselves, but then you have to ask, where does the effect end? Does it kick in, like, only at the edge of where they exist? Like, let's be super geeky for a second. Let's say that a reality warper wanted to mimic the Flash's infinite mass punch. So they warp reality just for themselves so that relativity exists just for them. Just for the atoms that make up their body. If that is the case, and you have a relativistic body that collides with a non-relativistic body and imparts it with the amount of energy that it would have, then you wouldn't, like, punch something so hard that it would explode. You would impart so much energy to it that it would collapse into a black hole. The reason being, energy and mass are interchangeable, and if enough energy is concentrated into one space without being able to release over time, then it would basically collapse into a black hole the same as mass would. I am not a physicist, so I can't 100% explain this, but Neil deGrasse Tyson did a great episode of Star Talk on it. So then you have to say, okay, the reality warper also has to alter the laws of gravity for their opponent so they don't collapse into a black hole, if your goal is to basically retain the original feats. And at that point, now you have to factor in all the opponent's feats without gravity, or with a higher gravity threshold. And at that point you have to ask, well, if gravity isn't going to cause them to collapse into a black hole, then will the amount of force imparted to them cause them to overcome the strong and weak nuclear force, causing their atoms to fuse and creating a nuclear explosion? And then the reality warper has to warp that. Then you have to ask, what does that do for the opponent? And then if they warp that enough, do their atoms just dissipate? And at that point, has the reality warper just, unwritten them from existence by making their atoms pull apart in the attempt to do the Flash's infinite mass punch? Like, this is why I say that feats can't be considered independent of plot and setting. Because the general sort of consensus when it comes to these versus battles is it just works. But certain feats are only possible or capable or have any sort of numerical meaning inside a specific setting. And if you're saying it just works, then basically you're saying that that setting has everything that they need for their entire power set to work. At which point it's not neutral at all. Then you should start considering far-out requirements for power, like the villain from Misfits who can only manipulate milk inside of your body. You'd have to say, oh, well, the opponent drank milk, if you're saying all the powers work. And at that point, you're writing a story for the versus battle. At which point you should consider narrative contact, and that's why I'm a Doyleist.